Springfield's Talk 104.1 and a good Tuesday morning, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Nick Reed. We are streaming live video. That's sponsored by Springfield Wraps. Also the designer of the KSGF studio. You can watch us live on Facebook. You can watch us live on YouTube. Or, of course, we just have the good old-fashioned audio. If you miss any of it, the app is there for you. Most of you are pretty familiar with how all of this works at this point. We're going to talk with Congressman Burleson in the 7 o'clock hour. And among other things, the House Republicans are setting up a vote on legislation aimed at keeping biological males out of girls' and women's sports at colleges, universities, public schools across the nation. This is, of course, a battle that's been brewing for some time. And it's just the position that Democrats take on this particular issue, to me, screams that their moral barometer is simply the opposite of whatever Republicans say. That if Republicans have a position on something, even if it just years ago was universally accepted, because of their hatred for Republicans and their desire to paint Republicans as being these radical extremists, they take the opposite position, whatever it is. And it has gotten so absurd that they won't even define what a woman is. They pretend like they don't know what a woman is. We have this absurd notion that being a male does not have any sort of biological advantage against a female when it comes to competition with certain sports in particular, despite the fact that there are numerous instances, and there's actually an article that now cycling, international cycling, is being infiltrated by men who compete as men and live as men, but they can't quite get to the top of their league, and so they decide to identify as women, and then all of a sudden they're winning, top of the game. Despite this, we're told constantly by Democrats that there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there is any sort of advantage. Which, if that's the case, then we don't need women's sports at all, right? We don't need gender-specific sports. If you get to identify as whatever gender you want aside from biology, and if, as the White House's position and the Democrats' position and the media's position and everyone on the left's position is that there is no advantage, then it's silliness to have gender-specific sports. It doesn't make any sense. It makes as much sense as dividing sports based on hair color or eye color. If there is no advantage, then all of this men's sports, women's sports stuff is total silliness. One might try and argue that, well, should have gender-specific sports because some people, they may want to be on a gender-specific team. But when you don't define gender as anything other than what any random person wants it to be, then that becomes irrelevant. You do not allow for a male to compete only against males or a female only against females. So it again becomes totally and completely irrelevant. Last week, Riley Gaines, who is an athlete, she is one of the females in our society that has had to deal with this, and with the swimming NCAA swimmer, and she went and spoke at San Francisco State University, and there were a bunch of trans activists that assaulted her physically and trapped her inside of a room for 3 hours. And instead of San Francisco State University coming out in support of women and declaring that violence against women is unacceptable, they have come out in support of the trans activists, the men who assaulted her. Again, all of this is an illustration that there really is no right or wrong for the left other than whatever the opposition says is wrong. And that's what their entire moral compass is based off of. I'll read to you some of what Riley Gaines, and you've got to give something. I mean, this is a gal who just simply, as a girl, had dreams of competing in the top tier of her class, and has instead found herself trying to stand up and defend girls in girls' sports. And, she has certainly not shied away from that. And then the Bud Light fallout continues. There are more and more distributors, particularly throughout the Midwest, that are noting they have never seen sales of Bud Light so abysmal, which kind of defeats the purpose of the ad campaign, doesn't it? Over the weekend, the gal who was hired to run marketing for Bud Light is out there claiming that this was done in order to get in that younger audience and to stay relevant by building up a new customer base, because Bud Light has seen over the years the customer base diminish. But this is another one of those instances where you have to ask yourself, is it working? And the answer is no. It clearly is not working. But does that stop, again, the left? Of course not. Instead, they double down because results are irrelevant. I'm going to give a programming note for tomorrow. We are doing a software upgrade. And because of the software upgrade, we are not going to necessarily be able to control and manage things. So there will be much of the show, or probably all of the show, will actually be some pre-recorded audio. So still relevant, of course, but just wanted you to have a heads up on that for tomorrow. It should all be done and said before Thursday rolls around, but that is just a bit of a programming note for you. The American Transmissions Talk and Text Line 447-KSGF. Jason Rima with news. First Alert Forecast sponsored by Navant. Employee benefits that work. Sunny 75 for a high today, 48 tonight, 77 tomorrow, and mostly sunny on Thursday with a high of 78. All right, House Republicans setting up a vote this week. Legislation aimed at keeping biological males out of girls' and women's sports at colleges, universities, public schools across the nation. The Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act was introduced by Representative Greg Steube, a Florida Republican who says it's time to save women's sports from biological males who have no place competing against women. The vote comes down as the debate over transgender rights, and so far, we all know the background of this. You know what's remarkable is it wasn't, but just a handful of years ago, that it was before this shift of replacing women with men, that Democrats portrayed themselves as being so pro-woman. They were talking about legislation to provide free birth control to women or free, tampons and these sorts of things, the products that are solely for women. And they have shifted from that to pushing for tampon machines to be in boys' bathrooms. This is the insane about face that they have taken. And again, I'm telling you, it's for one reason and one reason only. Because Republicans have stood by women on this issue and noted the absurdity of it. This, again, is nothing that anyone had any disagreement over just years ago. But they act as if men always got to dress up as women and always got to replace women on the covers of magazines and at White House visits and spokespersons for products. And then one day Republicans just decided to come along and say, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore. And so we are going to come out against this age-old tradition. That's how they behave. They act as if this is something that Republicans just one day made up, instead of the reality of what really occurred, and that is this is something that the left has made up, that they have made into an issue. They even oftentimes note, and they think that they are making, they don't realize the point they're making is not theirs. And they will argue that, there's always been transgenders. I mean, this isn't anything new. That is correct. And no one had a problem with that. But it's when you start lap dancing on elementary school kids that it becomes a problem. This was not an issue. That is an accurate point. This was something that everyone in our society was fine with, comfortable with, maybe not my cup of tea for a lot of people, but hey, your life, do what you want. Until they begin trying to force that life onto young kids. Under the bill, educational institutions that receive Title IX funding from the federal government would not be allowed to permit a person whose sex is male to participate in an athletic program or activity that is designed for women or girls. The bill says that the sex of an athlete would be recognized only by their reproductive biology and genetics at birth, aka science. The legislation would allow transgender female athletes, that would be male, to train or practice in a girls' athletic program, but only if no biological female athlete is deprived of a roster spot. See, now, I don't know why they have to make this complicated. This allowance, we'll allow guys to train or practice at girl athletic programs, but only if no biological female athletes are deprived of a roster. I bet you just say girls, girls, boys, boys. You have to get it all messy by adding a caveat here and a caveat there. Meanwhile, San Francisco State University endorsed the erasure of women this week when its top student affairs administrator released a statement reaffirming the transgender activist who attacked women's rights speaker Riley Gaines. Gaines arose to fame after speaking up about the unfairness of men masquerading as women to gain an advantage in women's sports, was assaulted last week after she attempted to address a crowd at a Turning Point USA event about the necessity of female spaces, especially in athletic settings. The chaos ensued mere hours after White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre encouraged radical gender ideologues to, quote, fight back against people who call for sex-specific spaces. Footage of the attack on SFSU's campus shows the former NCAA swimmer being chased by a crowd yelling trans rights or human rights and calling the swimmer a transphobic B-word. Gaines reported that during the chaos, she was assaulted by at least one man, trapped in a room for 3 hours. The mob also attempted to extort money from her in exchange for her freedom before she was finally able to escape. Gaines said neither campus police nor attending school administrators took steps to stop the violence, noting this is proof that women need sex-protected spaces. In a purported email to the school's campus community, the university thanked the so-called brave students for what it referred to as peacefully participating at the event where Gaines was physically attacked. Gaines said, when I saw the email, one of my friends who goes to the university sent it to me. I had to reread it because there was clearly no mention of what happened. Anything that actually occurred, there was no mention of it. What they described in that email was how proud they were of their so-called brave students who protested, quote, peacefully. What I experienced wasn't peaceful. It wouldn't even be peaceful in an alternate universe. It was quite literally the exact opposite. I've noted that in this whole back and forth, the treatment of women as it was seen cliched fashion from the 50s that, anytime a woman would speak up or speak out, sort of patted on the head like, well, she's just acting a little bit hysterical. You got to understand, a bit of an eye roll. And that is the way that they treat women today. They act as if they're hysterical. They act as if it's that time of the month. They act as if they need counseling. In fact, Riley Gaines was one of many female students who was told, maybe you need counseling. The problem's you. And this, we're told, all coming from the party of women. Fox News has an interesting story regarding sales of Bud Light since they decided to have a guy that dresses up like a girl become their spokesperson, which what somebody on the left do not understand is this has nothing to do with being transphobic. It just has to do with being really annoyed. I mean, this is such eye-rolling stuff, and it's just obnoxious is what it is. Now, for some people, there is the issue, understandably so, of this desire to essentially hold up men as being women, simply because they put on makeup and put their hair in pigtails, as this Dylan Mulvaney guy does. But largely, it's an annoyance, and you can't claim that it's not cause driven. They claim, of course, that really it has to do with inclusivity. Obviously, this is not the route to go. If you are wanting to be inclusive, what does that suggest? That suggests that you want to have a product that everyone feels welcome. The messaging is applicable to everyone's lifestyle as best as possible, other than people who don't drink, of course. Socially speaking, there are not many issues that are as contentious as issues surrounding gender right now. This would be similar to claiming that you are going to come out with an inclusive message and then having it be all about abortion, one way or another, whether it's pro-life or pro-abortion. Now, would you recommend that if your goal was to have a product that was going to make everyone who drinks feel welcome? Probably not. Why? Because you have a brain in your head. What I found interesting, I'm going to share with you some of the numbers in terms of sales and how they have decreased. And what is pretty interesting is they sort of randomly, they talk to different bar owners and pub owners. And one pub in Hell's Kitchen, which is a New York City neighborhood known for its large and vocal gay community, reported that Bud Light draft sales dropped by 58%. Now, this is interesting because the left loves to group LGBTQ plus all together. But even at least in this somewhat anecdotal story, you have a massive decrease in sales in one of the gayest parts of the country. Some of the other devastating numbers I'll share with you coming up. We're going to get a traffic update. The American Transmissions talk and text line 447 KSGF. Aller Building Company, OLLER, in Ozark, Woodcrest Development. 3 to 4 bedroom homes. You've got the Woodvale development underway at Golden and Weaver new subdivision. These are homes for those of you who want it brand new. No remodeling necessary. It is the way you want it from the get-go. You visit their showroom floor. They get you all set up. Easy peasy, and the home is exactly the way you want it the first time you walk through that door. Aller Building Company, OLLER. First alert forecast, sunny 75 today, low of 48 tonight. Sunny 77 tomorrow, mostly sunny on Thursday, a high of 78. So listen to some of these numbers. Here's the headline of the Fox News story. Bud Light suffers bloodbath as longtime and loyal customers or consumers revolt against transgender campaign. Consumers nationwide revolting against the nation's top-selling beer brand after it stepped, quote, recklessly into the culture wars last week with its new spokesperson, transgender TikTok star Dylan Mulvaney, according to bar owners and beer industry experts around the country. Jeff Fritter, owner of Case and Bucks, a restaurant and sports bar in Barnhart, Missouri, told Fox Business, I think society flexes its muscles sometimes and reminds manufacturers that the consumer is still in charge. In Bud Light's effort to be inclusive, they excluded almost everybody else, including their traditional audience. He cited sports fans, working people, and women as loyal Bud Light consumers of the brand suddenly excluded in its race to go woke. But even Fritter's bar witnessed a catastrophic decrease in sales of the hometown suds among loyal and local customers this week. Sales of Anheuser-Busch bottled products dropped 30% over the past week, while draft beer plummeted 50%. Similar stories found around the country. Bud Light normally outsells rival products, Miller Lite and Coors Light, 25-1 at Braintree Brew House in Massachusetts, a sprawling sports bar just outside of Boston, but not this week. 80% of Bud Light drinkers ordered something else this week, Brewhouse owner Alex Karras said, while the 20% who did order Bud Light weren't on social media and hadn't heard yet about the new transgender pitch person. He said they didn't order it again after other patrons told them about the Bud Light marketing misfire. One pub in Hell's Kitchen, now this is what's really interesting. One pub in Hell's Kitchen, a New York City neighborhood known for its large and vocal gay community, reported that Bud Light draft sales dropped 58% this week, while Bud Light bottle sales were down 70%. Now, this is, again, one of the most vocal gay and lesbian areas of the country. What does this tell us? This tells us that it's not about anti-anything, that these aren't a bunch of crazed lunatic, MAGA hat-wearing right-wingers. Even within the gay and lesbian community, a massive drop-off in purchasing of Bud Light. Bud Light's decision to dive into the culture wars was a, quote, bad decision that defied virtually every rule in building, branding, and marketing, a national beer industry analyst told Fox Business. He cited a nightmare scenario for Bud Light sales reps in Texas, where the brand has for years sponsored a large weekly dart league with 100-plus players each Thursday night. The bar typically sells through 3 kegs of Bud Light at the event, which is a total of 495 12-ounce pours. Instead of the standard 495 pours, the bar sold 4 12-ounce Bud Light bottles through the week as the dart players held a mass protest against the league's sponsor. A beer sales rep said they've already done enough damage in 1 week to disrupt year-long sales projections. He noted you don't just make up these sales. People aren't going to drink twice as much Bud Light the following weekend to recover the lost business. For a brand as large as Bud Light, the public relations calamity already represents millions of lost dollars, even if the consumer revolt ended tomorrow. Bud Light is famous for hiring the best marketing people in the business, the national sales rep said, but this time they hired the wrong person, he indicated. Bud Light Vice President of Marketing Alyssa Heinerscheid said she was inspired to update the, quote, fratty and out-of-touch humor of the beer company with inclusivity in a March 30th interview with the podcast Make Yourself at Home podcast. What is hilarious about that position is her belief that the marketing campaigns that had been underway prior to her taking on the role were out of touch, and she was going to fix that. The owner of Harpo's Bar and Grill in Chesterfield, Missouri, said it's kind of mind-boggling they stepped into this realm. You're marketing to an audience that represents a fraction of 1% of consumers while alienating the much larger base of your consumers. He noted it seems Bud Light has everything to lose, very little to gain, as its current drinkers are not real receptive to the new development. This also indicates the cultural bubble that people on the left live in. I suspect that this is an individual, like so many other people on the left, that alienate themselves from diversity, true diversity. I mean, studies have shown consistently that it's people on the left who have no problem and actually feel that it's virtuous to not have anyone in your life that has a diverse perspective on things. And when you live that way, you tend to assume that your belief system is in the extreme majority. How often have we heard people on the left, whether it's from the White House or marketing people, that claim that it's the extreme minority who is opposed to this sort of thing? This clearly indicates that's not the case. But I do believe this probably is quite surprising to this marketing person to find out that, in fact, she is in the minority. And this continued way of going through life for people on the left and isolating themselves off from the rest of the world and only spending time around people who have the exact same political views, social views, moral views, leaves you in la-la land and detached from reality. Now, I just want to see where it goes from here. You know, you had Eminem kind of do that screwy thing for a bit, where they were, what was it? They had a transgender Eminem. Wasn't that Eminem's that did that? They had a transgender Eminem.
No, so they made them non-binary, I think.
Oh, is that what?
Yeah.
And then they did that weird shift to Maya Rudolph.
Yes.
And that ad campaign made what is with these people?
And then they were like, oh, all of the M&Ms are going to be back at a later time. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
They got all that backlash.
And I haven't noticed real heavy marketing from M&Ms. It's almost as if they've decided, let's just back away, probably right now thanking the good Lord for Bud Light and this complete train wreck that they have just managed to get themselves into. There was another product, gosh, it was a couple years ago, and it was a similar sort of situation. I can't think of what it is, though. They do this every once in a while. It's a person, again, that has isolated him or herself off from the rest of the world and believe genuinely that they are in the majority when they are in the extreme minority because they believe their own propaganda, and then this sort of thing occurs. So, yeah, how Bud Light is going to get out of this, I don't know. What a change. Remember Bud Light back in the, it was prior to 9/11. They had such a tremendously successful ad campaign, Real American Hero. Do you remember those? And there were radio. There probably was television versions as well, but I just remember radio ads because, I'm in radio. And it would be, the beer delivery guy or this guy, and it had, and we salute you for being an American hero.
Yeah, I remember those.
Well, and then they stopped that after 9/11 because they felt it trivialized the term hero. I remember that ad campaign. They pulled all of those, and with what we watched occur with fire and law enforcement and others on 9/11, that term hero, people were much more particular about the usage of it. And then they still did the ad campaign, but it wasn't American hero any longer. They changed the hero verbiage, and Bud Light has gone from that to, which I don't even know if you've seen any of the TikTok videos of this guy. He's a weirdo. And I'm not talking about because he's transgender. Just some of he portrays himself as a little girl, and it's just in reality, of all of the transgender people, you're going to pick this guy? Well, I am going to watch and see how or if they even try to get themselves out of it. Some of these people on the left are so stubborn they would rather the ship go down burning than ever acknowledge they were wrong. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Speaking of weirdos, did you see this Dalai Lama thing? What the hell?
What was that?
Here's the headline. If you missed out on this, Dalai Lama under fire after asking young boy I can't even hardly say the words, to suck his tongue in bizarre viral video. Quote, menace to children. Yeah, that's not normal behavior. Wait, it apparently is for some people. This is just becoming more and more prevalent. The more you look around, you're seeing some of these people that are comfortable behaving in a sexual manner around kids. And it makes you wonder what goes on. How normalized is it for some of these folks? The Dalai Lama under fire after a disturbing video showed him kissing a young boy in the lips and asking him to suck his tongue. In the shocking footage that was... I couldn't watch it. You watched it.
Yeah, it popped up in my feed.
Yeah, you think, what? Is this being taken out? Because so much is clickbait and taken out of context. But this apparently was not.
No, it was not taken out of context.
In the shocking footage that was reportedly filmed in February, a young boy asked the Tibetan spiritual leader for a hug. The Dalai Lama then invited the young boy on stage, and after the hug, the spiritual leader forcibly lifts the boy's head from underneath his chin to kiss him on the lips. The pair pressed their foreheads together in a bizarre scene before getting even stranger. Quote, "Suck my tongue," the Dalai Lama said. While sticking out his tongue, the boy appeared uncomfortable and began to fulfill the 87-year-old's request, but did not go through with it. Once the video went viral, the Dalai Lama issued a statement apologizing to the boy and his family while also downplaying it as playful teasing. That's kind of weird teasing. That's not normal teasing. The unearthed footage and apology were shredded on social media, with critics even calling the Dalai Lama a pedophile and a, quote, sick old man. Quote, "He missed the bit where he kissed the boy and asked him to suck the Dalai Lama's tongue," columnist Owen Jones responded. Filmmaker Luke Renner asked, "Why is this written in the third person? His Holiness abused a child face-to-face but can't be bothered to personally address the matter himself?" Journalist Raneem Balkazam responded, "Teasing? This has nothing to do with teasing. This is a highly questionable behavior jeopardizing the little boy's mental health, and it falls under the abuse of childhood innocence. Where did you even have such a filthy and revolting thought? You're truly disgusting. You're a menace to children." A South African geologist with over 400,000 followers responded to the apology. Social media influencer Ian Michael Chong wrote, "This sick, disturbing video of the Dalai Lama making a child suck his tongue emerged months ago, but it has only just now made waves on social media, prompting the holy man to issue an apology. Why wasn't it a problem for him before it went viral?" The incident occurred in northern India. Many Indian journalists were among the first to condemn it. Journalist Ismat Ara wrote, "There's nothing innocent or plainful about asking a minor to suck your..." Just what a... This sexualization of children does not come without consequence. And unfortunately, it's the children who suffer. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. A1 Custom Car Care, all of your car care needs. Springtime, it's a good time to take your vehicle in, check out any routine maintenance you need done. You get accustomed to the oil changes, and that's pretty top of mind. In fact, a lot of vehicles just automatically remind you when it is time for an oil change. But your vehicle has a specific maintenance schedule beyond that, and you may not know what it is, but A1 Custom Car Care can find out for you and then let you know once you do bring it in for an oil change that coincides with a need for one of the other manufactured checkoffs, if you will. Then they can, get that done for you, and that way your vehicle lasts as long as possible and runs as efficiently as possible. A1 Custom Car Care. A left-wing journalist is refusing to apologize for criticizing terminology such as birthing persons on Monday. The Young Turks co-host Anna Kasparian received backlash after she called transgender inclusive language degrading to women. Those on the left responded by calling her right wing. This is, again, the world that we live in. This is what is going to need to happen, and that is people on the left. Democrats are going to have to start standing up for women, crossing the political aisle and joining with Republicans. The left-wing journalist spoke out about the backlash in a tweet yesterday, saying, LOL, the meltdown over wanting to be referred to as a woman rather than a birthing person is pretty wild. I'll never apologize for that, especially as a biological woman who has had the blanking lifetime of being told I'm less than. I'm a woman, no apologies. Her tweet was again met with backlash, with activist Charlotte Clymer arguing that's not what's happening, when referring to the whole community of people who are capable of pregnancy in the context of pregnancy. Repro advocates using birthing person to include trans men plus non-binary people. No one is arbitrarily calling individual women birthing persons, she tweeted. Does any of that even make sense? What a world. Here, so you've got this. She's a woman. She is a left-wing woman doing what it is that she has always done and stood up for women's rights, and she's being trashed for it. A transgender congressional candidate alleged that Kasparian was only piling on the attack against trans people, saying, I really don't understand why you're still tweeting about this. How many times a day are you being referred to as a birthing person in real life? This is once again that condescending, oh, keep your mouth shut, sweetheart. There's something wrong with you. You just need to calm down a little bit. Why don't you go just do some shopping? That might make you feel better. The congressional candidate went on in her tweet to the left-wing journalist saying, knowing the intense scrutiny and hate trans people are facing, along with the hundreds of anti-trans bills, could you just not? Can't you just keep your mouth shut, sweetheart? Don't you know your place as a birthing person? Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk with Congressman Eric Burleson. Also, talk a little bit about the EPA and working towards the elimination of gas-powered vehicles. We got registration underway at ksgf.com. The ultimate date night. Partnered with our friends, Wonders of Wildlife, Dogwood Canyon, the Ozark Mill at Finley Farms. Sending you to some of the favorite spots in the 417. You can get registered right now at ksgf.com to be eligible to win that prize pack. We're going to talk with Congressman Burleson here in just a couple of moments. Also, a look at the first alert forecast. Beautiful mid to upper 70s for most of the week. Jason Ryman now with the latest news. First alert forecast sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvement. Sunny 75 for a high today, 48 tonight for low. Sunny 77 tomorrow, Thursday. Mostly sunny, high of 78. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Well, spring is here, which means it's a great time to do some maintenance around your home. Now, for all of those spring home maintenance repairs, highly recommend you give Beatles Property Maintenance a call. Now, Beatles is spelled Beadles, and they can help you out with a variety of home repairs and maintenance. They can help you update your lighting throughout your house, help you with a bathroom remodel, do deck repairs, and so much more. And if you're thinking about selling your home this spring, Beatles is also great at tackling a punch list. So whether you have more serious home repairs that need to be addressed or just a list of home maintenance items that need to get tackled, give Beatles Property Maintenance a call today. You can find all of the contact information for Bruce and the Beatles Property Maintenance team under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
All right, traffic update, and then 2 minutes from there, we shall talk with Congressman Eric Burleson. Streaming live, ksgf.com. Congressman Burleson, how do you do, sir?
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Doing just fine here. How's the weather there? It's beautiful here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are here.
I'm here.
Oh,
Yes, with the kids. We're getting ready to get them to school this morning, and but because of Easter break, we got to be back.
Oh, nice.
So,
Well, that's good. That is
and
good to hear. I wanted to talk a little bit, if you don't mind. It seemed as if, I don't know, a few months ago, maybe not that far back, there was all the talk about debt ceiling and, it comes with that government shutdown talk and so forth. And then that just somewhat disappeared. Where are things? And I'm sure the White House is going to see its position as one where they have the leverage because they can just accuse you guys of shutting down government. That always seems to work for them. And, of course, the media plays it up and so forth, and that becomes a difficult obstacle for fiscal responsible members of Congress. What are we looking at here?
well, you're right. They try to push it to brinksmanship, and then they blame Republicans. When the truth is, the real problem is that Democrats put us in this crisis where we have to raise the debt. I'm almost of the opinion, Nick, where I've supported a balanced budget amendment. In a way, we have a balanced budget amendment or a mechanism, and that is the debt ceiling. And so, at some point, we have to say we're not raising it. Period. It's not going to be raised, so let's figure this out and force ourselves to start living within a budget, because there's a natural debt ceiling, and that is like there's a point of no return for the federal government where the payments back on the interest of the debt becomes unsustainable, and then you just end up in a death spiral. And we're approaching that level. We're at $32 trillion, and given our gross domestic product nationally, like how much the United States produces and what we can generate revenue from with taxes, we're at the same height that we were at the end of World War II. So think about that as a crisis situation, is that if China or Russia truly picked a fight with the United States, we would be financially in a very difficult situation to fund any conflict. So we're at $32 trillion, the same debt level as World War II, and we're not even in war. So we've got to rein in the spending. And so, and when you look at what Joe Biden and Democrats spent money on, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So, for example, we sent money to Ecuador to fund drag shows. Okay, regardless of how you feel about drag shows, I don't think we should be spending money on that, but especially not in other countries. Okay, the other thing is, for example, we spent millions and millions of dollars to fund the World Economic Forum Davos event. So let's just put this in perspective. We sent $60 million to Davos so that all these globalist rich people can fly in their private jets and eat steaks and drink wine and talk about how they're going to make you and I eat crickets and reduce our carbon footprint. This is complete insanity, the way we spend our money, and somebody has to step in.
We're talking with Congressman Burleson. Here's a concern I have, and you can weigh in on whether it's a realistic concern, that there will be, quote, moderate or even left-wing Republicans that want to continue the spending, and they will potentially cross over the aisle to help push through Democrat spending. Is that a likely scenario, and what does that look like?
It is. I mean, sadly, that's the case. When people see us as a majority and they say, well, finally we got a Republican majority, I'm just going to be blunt. You don't have a conservative majority. Right. And I think that we don't want to stop lying. I don't want to lie to people I want people to know who is actually conservative, who's not. And so the mechanisms that we fought for with the McCarthy vote included making it so that we could have independent amendments on bills on the floor, on these appropriation bills. So when bills go to the floor, I can offer these amendments. So I preceded that by sending 270 appropriations letters. My staff worked on this. We were able to identify and cut spending for all these woke, weaponized programs that we found, because the Biden administration has taken nearly every budget item they could and turned it into some like DEI or, woke, social justice warrior stuff. And so I've identified those. We sent 270 separate letters to the appropriations committees and their subcommittees saying this program needs to be cut or language needs to restrict this. And what we're saying is, if you don't do a committee, I'm going to drop this as an amendment on the floor, and we're all going to vote for it. So if you want to continue to send money to Ecuador to fund drag shows, that's on you. I'm not funding it, and my district is not going to go on record as funding it. So that's my strategy.
The Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, this is something that I believe is that this week that you all are going to be set up to vote on it, and how do you see that going?
I think that the Republican majority, I think that we are united in that effort. But this is a common sense thing. I think, especially you saw what happened with Anheuser-Busch. I think the culture has quickly, they've realized they pushed this too far. I think, or especially corporate America, right? There's a sentiment that people have where it's like live and let live, but what's happened in America is this culture wants to just shove things down people's throats. They want to push it into your face and make you watch it on your television screen every day, and then have to like shield your kids from it. So, and then with the fact that they want to push this into our sports teams and make our daughters compete, it's just not. I think it's the bridge too far for this.
There was an interesting story I read earlier, Fox Business, and they spoke with a number of bar owners, some in Missouri, but then they, interestingly enough, decided to go to Hell's Kitchen, that has a very large and very vocal pro-LGBTQ community, primarily gay and lesbian, and they noted that their Bud Light sales had made a tremendous drop in that area too, pretty consistent with what other bars across the country. And I thought that was interesting because the left likes to portray those who are opposed to this sort of marketing, even if it's just because they're annoyed at so much of it, as being anti-gay, when in fact it appears as if even bars that are in the heavily gay districts of this country, specifically New York, it was like almost an 80% decrease in draft Bud Light sales, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, gone are the days of, it's sad, but like a lot of our advertising was about defining the man and woman, and elevating what is manhood and the things about the traits about men that are noble and heroic and courageous and strong and those kind of things. And they instead want to celebrate people that are the opposite of that. And that is such a small minority of people. I mean, yes, are there effeminate men in this world? Yes. But is this what we want to, like, that population, you want to like try to push that into everyone's screen and put it in front of everyone and celebrate that all the time? I think people are they're done with it.
Yeah.
So
we're talking with Congressman Burleson. Has there been any? I know I'm kind of bouncing around here, but we haven't had an opportunity to talk with you in a couple weeks. But the whole spy balloon situation, and of course, we were lied to. We were told that a number of different things, everything from the Chinese had no operational control over it to we were actually monitoring them, jokes on them. They weren't getting any info. We were able to get info from them. And what we have learned, or we learned last week or the week prior, that none of that was true, that they were in real time sending what information they were gleaming back to Beijing, that they were actually in some instances doing figure eights, controlling it in order to have a longer period of time over some of those military installations. I mean, is there any accountability that can be held? Are there any hearings on this? Where does that stand?
Yeah, that would be either under the Intelligence Committee or the House Armed Services Committee or Oversight. And I'm on Oversight. Sometimes House Armed Services, they're too close to the military, and so when it comes to doing the difficult work, they punt it to Oversight. But you're absolutely right. I think that we need to bring in the intelligence community and question them on this. And I was in a briefing. I think we talked about this before, and they said to us, members of Congress, exactly what you just mentioned. And so it's in the press, so I can say this. They said, we were monitoring this. It wasn't sending any information back. It stops collecting it. It stops sending information at a certain point, which is why we felt comfortable to allow it to float across the United States. And members of Congress went to the microphone and one after another called BS.
Right.
Like members of Congress didn't trust the intelligence community. So I think that was the one moment where you saw both Republicans and Democrats agree on something. That's the only moment I've seen in D.C. where both Republicans and Democrats were in agreement that we failed, that our intelligence community, our military failed us on that spy balloon. And then they overreacted on the next two balloons, right? So they shot down, hobbyist weather balloons, like actual weather balloons. So I think that they embarrassed our country. I mean, I'm not a big fan of this president, but I don't care who you are, who it is. It's the president of the United States, and you're an American citizen. And we and our intelligence community and our military embarrassed this president. And he doesn't need any help getting embarrassed on the world stage.
Congressman Burleson with us. Anything before we let you go? I know you're busy and want to spend as much time with your family as possible while you are home, but anything else that you'd like people to be aware of that you're working on or that's coming down the pike? Yeah,
the SAFA bill and some of these other, these gun legislation. I know that there's a lot of bills that I've filed to try to stop the efforts of the left to try to make pistol braces illegal. So I tried it at the state level. I'm going to keep fighting at the federal level. Hopefully the court will weigh in, but we're getting a lot of emails about that, and it's something that we're definitely. I'm doing everything I possibly can.
I wanted to ask one last question because of an email that I received, and it seems as if it's still new information, so you may not really have any insight, but it's been reported that the FBI had infiltrated the Catholic Church, just essentially looking to get recruits to report on members of the Catholic Church as domestic terrorists, which seems pretty in line with our government, sadly. Is there any sense of outrage in Congress? Where does all that stand?
Yeah, there is, and that will probably fall into the Judiciary Committee. So Jim Jordan, who chairs that, I've seen he has already come out publicly to admonish this, and because the FBI reports through the Judiciary Committee, I am looking forward to the day that he hauls them in front of Congress and makes them come to account for what they're doing. Yeah. But the sad part is that we can't really. There's very few tools that we have because we don't have the presidency.
Right.
And so, but it is shameful what they did, right? This is not new. Remember, they did this under Obama. The FBI declared a number of people, like if you were a Tea Partier,
Right.
um, a member of like Sons of the American Revolution, all of these civic groups that are, most people would consider patriotic, they wanted to label you a domestic terrorist. And but this is not new for the FBI. We really need to clean house in that department.
Yeah. Congressman Burleson, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Nick. Have a great day.
All right, you do the same. Safe travels. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. And we have our video stream via Facebook, 104.1 Nick Reed. Also, YouTube. Video stream sponsored by Springfield Wraps, designer of the KSGF studio. Look at weather coming up, plus Biden banning 53% of Americans from buying cars. If you look at the numbers, a new move by the administration to make it, we're going to end up like Cuba, where other than just what few elites there are, everyone's going to have these really late model cars because of government intervention in the free market. All of those home loan needs, constantly up to date they are, easily accessible, 7 days a week, up until 9 o'clock at night. You have direct access to Don, Anthony, Alex, Carricker, and others on their team. And anytime there's a change in the landscape, you know that they're going to be on top of it for you. They're the folks you want on your side. Just as plain and straightforward as that. IWantAGreatHomeLoan.com, because you do. The first alert forecast, sunny 75 for a high today. Clear 48 for a low tonight, sunny 77 for tomorrow, and Thursday mostly sunny, a high of 78. Well, if there's one thing that the Biden administration loves to do through policy is make things more expensive for the average American. And vehicles are the next target. The New York Times reporting that the Biden administration is set to abuse EPA regulations to eliminate most real car sales by 2030. The plan is to force 67% of car sales to be electric by 2032. Most Americans won't be able to afford them, but they will have no other option. Even the cheapest electric cars, which are still far more expensive than their real car counterparts, are just one battery problem away from turning into mostly unusable junk, are out of the price range of the majority of Americans who need an income of $80,000 to make an EV auto loan work. That's fine in Washington, D.C., where the median income is $83,567. It is the highest in the nation, but will entirely price much of the country out of the new car market. And again, we're going to watch them, if they have their way, turn our country into a third world country when it comes to vehicle ownership, where you're going to have the middle and lower income people not able to afford the cars that they are trying to market manipulate, and instead you're going to just be working on these old cars and trying to keep those things going alive as long as possible. With 53% of Americans earning less than $75,000, some of the 16% who earn $50,000 to $75,000 may be able to make an electric vehicle purchase work if they squeeze cutback on food and clothes for the kids, but the remaining 37% will be completely locked out. Unable to own a car, they'll have even bigger monthly payments, or, with no transportation, be unable to work. The new poor will be anyone who can't afford an electric car, and that's 53% of Americans. Now, like any vehicle, whatever it may be, let it work within the free market system. The consumer benefits when that occurs. The free market system does a couple of things. One, it makes items more affordable for the average person. In addition to that, it also helps promote advanced technology because of competition. When the government comes in and tells the marketplace, you have to build this percentage of this type of vehicle, regardless of cost, regardless of any other free market component, you are making things less effective, less efficient, and more expensive. Just look at medical care in this country. Or to better illustrate the point, look at medical care in which government makes promises and guarantees in terms of insurance versus cosmetic surgeries, which do not have those influences by the government. One of the two becomes more expensive year after year, far outpacing the rate of inflation, while the other, that being the sort of medical care that does not involve government, cosmetic surgery, becomes cheaper and more readily available. In addition to this, and I want to play audio coming up because it is about time somebody starts speaking on this, the fact that the administration continues to make claims about the need to force us into a predominantly electric vehicle market by using government. The reasons they give for doing this are not reasons that are served. It is not good for the environment, and it does not make us less reliant on foreign countries. These are two of the big selling points. We're constantly told, well, this is why we need electric vehicles, to get us off of foreign oil, which we were off of during the Trump years, but in an effort to once again make it so painful to simply operate a vehicle utilizing gasoline so that people will not mind shifting or will already be in enough pain at the pump that the increased cost of an electric vehicle will seem just like half a dozen of one, six of another. We're told that it's good for the environment, not the case. Former Environmental Protection Agency Chief of Staff Mandy Gunasakara was on Fox Business yesterday and was asked about this very issue and had the following to say.
Mandy, you're at the EPA. Is anyone concerned about national security? Because 80% of cobalt is refined in China, 60% of lithium is refined and manufactured in China. So we're outsourcing American energy independence to China at a time when they're saber rattling. They're going to go to war with Taiwan. They're talking about going to war with us. They're calling us enemies. Does anyone care about that issue at the EPA?
Well, right now, that's a really good question. We certainly cared in the Trump administration when we instituted the America First policy approach to energy development and environmental protection. Under the Biden administration, we've seen time and time again their willingness to sell out the American economy and our natural interests just to comply with their Green New Deal dreams. And so it's a very good question because it is the CCP, not the American people, that stand to benefit from this latest EV mandate, because the electric vehicle batteries, the majority of the critical minerals that go into those batteries are owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And we're talking about environmental degradation here, but they also ignore basic humanitarian standards, and they rely on both forced and child labor to deliver these critical minerals to market. So there's a lot of questions. I think at the top of that list should be the national security implications, because energy security is directly tied to national security. And this administration goes out of its way not only to sell out the American economy, but to shift reliance on important minerals and resources overseas, falling into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
All accurate information that no one denies. It gets ignored. And there is a casual denial by the administration by falsely claiming that, again, this is a move that will help the environment. This is a move to get us off of reliance of foreign countries, when in fact 80% of cobalt is refined in China, 60% of lithium. You just think of the absurd of all of the countries to decide to make the American people more relied upon. China. This is the last country we want to hand over. They must almost wonder if we are just fooling them. They cannot imagine, I'm sure, how dumb American policy is when it comes to energy. Here they have very deliberately, very methodically, with a great deal of patience, been infiltrating a number of areas of American life through the universities, drugs, human trafficking, recruiting athletes to essentially act as apologists for them, representing companies that benefit from slave labor. And now the United States have proactively, under this administration, moving towards reliance on China. Think about a world in which we are, if the left gets their way, totally shifted, or even their goal of 67% of vehicles being electric vehicles by 2033, by 2030. Do we not recall the supply chain issues that we dealt with during COVID? Do we not recall the conversations about a need to move away from China when it comes to prescription drugs? And we're going to shift the ability to transport people, ourselves, items, food. We're going to make ourselves reliant on China for the batteries, for the necessary elements. What happens when China's like, oh, by the way, you think of the leverage they're going to have over the United States when it comes to Taiwan. And what catastrophic impact they can push upon our economy by simply, one, making us reliant on cobalt, lithium, which they control the world supply of, and then being able to use that against us. It is truly mind-boggling, the almost daily efforts of this administration to make us weaker and more reliant on the bad players in this world. And I mean, how many times must we go back and remember Barack Obama's statement of never underestimate Joe's ability to F things up? Or former Obama Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, noting that Biden, when it comes to foreign policy issues and dealing with foreign countries, has never been right. And he liked Biden. Or bin Laden's writings and the rationale he used for a plan to assassinate Obama, and that was to put Biden in the White House because he felt that what they failed to do on 9/11, and that was bring this country down completely, he felt that Biden would do as president of the United States. And if ever there was an accurate predictor of a President Joe Biden, it was Osama bin Laden. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers.
Hey, that's me. Well, if you had damage to your roof with the recent storms that we had last week, and you're not sure if you need to file an insurance claim or not, I recommend giving Josh and the Pyramid Roofing Company a call today. The Pyramid team, they will walk you through the process and make it super simple. They'll make it as simple as possible. They can come out, they'll do a free estimate, get on your roof so you don't have to, and see exactly what is going on with your roof. And they'll be upfront and honest with you. Maybe you don't need a whole new roof. Maybe you need just a roof repair. But whatever your roofing situation is, the Pyramid team, they will get you taken care of. You can find all of the contact information for Josh in the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab. And while you're there, you can also see a video of the work that the Pyramid team did on my roof. All of that's going to be housed at ksgf.com.
Report, Biden recruiting an army of influencers for the 2024 race. Well, isn't this just... listen. It's the perfect audience for his messaging. Individuals detached from reality. Individuals who have chosen to believe that everything that the Democrats do is good, no matter how often the policies fail. Individuals that don't really have any actual life experience. I mean, yeah. President Joe Biden, who has yet to officially announce he's running for re-election, is reportedly going to rely on an army of online influencers for his re-election campaign, and they could have their own briefing room at the White House. This is what this administration has reduced the presidency to. A briefing room for influencers at the White House. The president's campaign seeks to boost Biden's standing among young voters who are crucial to Democrats' success in elections and will be used to counter former President Donald Trump's massive social media following if he is the nominee, according to Axios. The report noted the president's digital strategy team would like to connect with influencers across the country to help Biden tout his record to those who do not follow the social media accounts of Biden, the White House, or the Democrat Party. Reportedly, there are 4 Biden digital staffers run by Rob Flaherty, who has been named assistant to the president and will hold the same rank as press secretary, focused on influencers and independent content creators on the White House payroll, not the Biden campaign. Some unpaid and like-minded content creators working with the White House include TikToker Harry Sisson, who talks about news on the Chinese social media app, and Vivian Tu, who talks about financial topics on the Chinese social media app. Biden's effort comes as polling shows younger voters ages 18 to 29 prefer Biden over the former president by a 26-point margin during the last presidential election and preferred Democrats over Republicans by a 28% margin in the 2022 midterms, according to Tufts University. Jen O'Malley Dillon, White House Deputy Chief of Staff, told Axios, "We're trying to reach young people, but also moms who use different platforms to get information, and climate activists and people whose main way of getting information is digital." Axios also noted that the social media influencers might have their own briefing room in the White House and allow influencers more access to the president. Well, sure. What better people than, frankly, individuals that will have absolutely no background or knowledge of what is going on than to ask questions of the president, having individuals that aren't going to be able to ask real questions, but ask questions like, what's your favorite ice cream? What's it like trying to move the country forward when you have Republicans that are constantly trying to stop you? What would you say if one of your grandchildren came out as transgender? These are the sorts of hard-hitting questions that we're going to get. What an embarrassment they're turning our country into. And what the perfect nature of this? Here they're going to rely on influencers to once again try and elect the rich old white guy. I thought all of these left-wingers, these social media influencers on the left, were just so open and all about diversity. And here, this is really who they're going to push for, the old rich white guy. I mean, they're going to attach their reputation to this guy. There are other Democrats that are already announcing that they're running against Biden. Miriam Williamson being one of them. RFK Jr. being another one. And while they're both white individuals, at least one is a female, although I suppose we shouldn't make such assumptions given that it is the Democrat Party. It's going to be cringeworthy to watch this play out, these individuals that portray themselves as being so hip and so beyond the cisgender white male toxicity, and here they're going to be out there putting their reputations on the line to get the cisgender old white guy elected president. The oldest president in the history of the country. I'm sure it'll come across as very, very authentic and thoughtful. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Axios is reporting that should Biden run for re-election, he is going to recruit an army of influencers for the race. Now, you know what this is? This is in place of talking to reporters. That's what this is going to be. They are attempting to figure out a way to communicate with the public, that being the Biden 2024 campaign, without ever having to answer a question of mainstream media again. Or if they do, it'll be very, very, very limited. And then anytime they get pressed on it, they will note that he gives all sorts of interviews all the time. But, he's young and hip. And so influencers are a place that he is going to. It will be interesting to see how the mainstream media, as it moves in this direction, treats this sort of behavior. They're already questioning Karine Jean-Pierre about the fact that the White House is apparently trying to protect Biden. There was a question, I believe it was yesterday, from some reporter noting that he works for a company that has over 100 different television stations, and one of the questions that he receives over and over and over again is, why are they protecting Biden? Why are they hiding him? Why isn't that Biden does not do press conferences? Now, of course, we all know the answer to this. But they're trying to get some sort of acknowledgement out of the White House. Karine Jean-Pierre lies like she always does and claims, well, he just gives a record number of interviews. I don't know what you're talking about. So the news, on top of the realization that the media is considered irrelevant to Biden, and he has essentially cut them off from all traditional interviews, and he is going to replace them with an army of influencers, individuals that have absolutely no life experience, that have no journalism degrees whatsoever, and they're going to maybe get their own briefing room at the White House? Now, will they quietly go along with this and just accept it as the new reality, or will they push back during the 2024 race? And time will tell. We've got news in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. Democrats dealt another blow from within their own ranks this week as yet another state lawmaker declared he was leaving the party. We don't hear as much about this as we would under a Trump presidency if you had Republicans switching parties because they didn't care for the way that Trump was taking the nation and what he was doing to the party. There have been a lot of Republicans that have complained about him, establishment Republicans. Now, they've said, hey, he's the one who's not the real Republican. We are, the Mitt Romneys and those sorts. And, of course, those individuals get a lot of attention. But there have been 3 Democrat lawmakers recently that have left the Democrat Party, switching to Republican in South Carolina, giving them a super veto-proof majority, that is, which has allowed them to just be, they've legislation that they have passed and has been vetoed by the governor there. They have resubmitted this legislation, given that they have a veto-proof majority. According to a Monday report by The Advocate, a Louisiana-based newspaper, State Rep Jeremy Lacombe announced he'd left the Democrat Party and would be registering as a Republican. It was not immediately clear what prompted Lacombe's departure. However, he is now the second Louisiana Democrat in less than a month to switch party affiliation and the third nationwide after another state lawmaker in North Carolina did the same. I think I said South. It's North Carolina. Last month, Louisiana State Rep Francis Thompson gave Republicans in the state house a supermajority after he switched his party affiliation. And earlier this month, North Carolina State Rep Tricia Cotham gave Republicans in the state house a supermajority with her switch as well. The switches come as Biden faces a near-record low approval rating among key groups, including women, at 43%. Voters age 45 plus at 41%, suburban voters 41%, rural voters 31%, Democrats 81%, Democratic men in particular 79%, according to a recent Fox News poll, is also at a low mark of 41% approval among suburban women. And so we're seeing more and more of these Democrat lawmakers switch, and that's pretty significant. To take 2 states and make them a supermajority for Republicans is no incidental switch. I'm not sure if the White House is being asked about these switcheroos. It would be interesting to note what they would officially say regarding more and more members of the Democrat Party switching affiliation in a way that has drastic impact on the power that the Republican Party has in each of those states. I want to share a piece from Front Page Magazine here in a couple of moments titled Murder Manifesto Mystery. And it is regarding the Nashville, Tennessee shooting, the targeting of a Christian school. The piece is interesting for a couple of reasons, but one, the FBI has this manifesto. And thus far have failed to release the manifesto. What has been laid out in this particular piece is a timeline of sorts of times in which the FBI has overlooked potential domestic terrorists, flat out ignored them for political correctness sakes. And this story lays out, or this piece rather lays out, an argument that this could potentially be another one of those scenarios in which the FBI could have and should have been able to prevent this from occurring, and whether or not that's what this manifesto, if there are things in this manifesto that arguably would have indicated or does indicate that the FBI was aware of a potential danger here, yet ignored it for whatever reason. So we'll hit on that here in a couple of moments. The American Transmissions Talk and Text Line 447-KSGF and our video stream on Facebook and YouTube, sponsored by Springfield Wraps. And now Jason Reimer with the latest news update. First Alert Forecast, sponsored by Navant. Employee benefits that work. Sunny, 75 today, clear, 48 tonight. For a low, sunny, 77 tomorrow. And Thursday, mostly sunny with a high of 78. I want to share a piece in Front Page Mag titled Murder Manifesto Mystery. And some of the piece is making a point about the Trans Day of Vengeance and so forth. But I think the history of FBI and their knowledge prior to certain shootings is what's actually the more important component to this piece. On Monday, March 27th, As the April 1st Trans Day of Vengeance approached, Audrey Hale, a woman who thinks she's a man, shot open a locked door and entered the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee in 14 minutes. Hale fired 152 rounds from an AR-15 style rifle. Hale shot dead Evelyn Dickhouse, 9 years old, Mike Hill, 61, William Kenny, 9, Catherine Kuntz, 60, Cynthia Pick, 61, and Haley Scruggs. That 9-year-old was the daughter of Chad Scruggs, senior pastor at the Covenant Presbyterian Church on the same site as the school. With 6 people dead, including 3 children, Hale's attack qualifies as a mass murder. And in any murder case, the questions of motive is paramount. Hale left clues in a manifesto, but trans-friendly activists sought to suppress its release. For example, Charles Moran of Log Cabin Republicans, advocates for equal rights for LGBTQ+ Americans, warned of serious consequences if the manifesto was released to the public. Enter Nashville City Councilman Robert Swope, who worked as Tennessee State Director for Donald Trump in 2016 and now heads the City Council's Public Safety, Beer, and Regulated Beverage Committee. Swope told the New York Post that the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit is working, quote, in tandem with the Metro Nashville Police Department to complete a very in-depth analysis of certain aspects of the shooter's life. According to the councilman, the manifesto is going to be released. It is just a matter of when. There are some incredible, brilliant psychological minds and psychological analysts combing through her entire life. While revelations await, one fact is perfectly clear. The FBI, supposed on guard 24/7 against domestic terrorism and violent extremism, failed to prevent Audrey Hale's attack. Relatives of the victims have reason to wonder what the FBI knew and when they knew it. The Trans Day of Vengeance openly served up the prospect of violence. In advance of this heavily promoted event, was the FBI tracking any person of interest who purchased multiple semi-automatic firearms? According to Nashville police, Hale planned the attack for months, documenting plans to commit mass murder at the Covenant School. With all of its money, resources, and allegedly brilliant minds, was the FBI profiling anyone who issued threats against transphobes in general or Christian schools in particular? Past cases give the people cause to wonder. In 2009, Major Nadal Hassan, a U.S. Army psychiatrist, was communicating with al-Qaeda terrorists, Anwar al-Awlaki, about killing Americans. As Lessons from Fort Hood explains, the FBI knew all about it. But someone in the FBI's Washington office judged that Hassan was not a threat and called off surveillance. On November 5th, 2009, at Fort Hood, Texas, yelling Allah Akbar as he fired, Hassan murdered 13 unarmed American soldiers. The unborn child of Private Francesca Velez brought the death count to 14. The Obama administration famously called this workplace violence, not terrorism or even gun violence. In his initial statement, Vice President Biden said the soldiers fell in a senseless tragedy and failed to mention a single victim. In similar style, the FBI did nothing to prevent the terrorist attack at San Bernardino in 2015, with 14 dead, and Orlando in 2016, with 49 dead. Consider also the case of Bernie Sanders supporter James Hodgkinson, who was carefully tracking Republican legislators. On June 14, 2017, as the representatives played baseball, Hodgkinson opened fire on them, wounding 5, nearly killing Representative Steve Scalise. The FBI, then under Andrew McCabe, passed off Hodgkinson's attack as suicide by cop, a ludicrous claim that drew criticisms from Republicans and Democrats alike. Hodgkinson shot first at unarmed civilians. Audrey Hale shot first at innocent children and the teachers and staff who sought to protect them. With Hale's manifesto in the hands of the FBI, relatives of the victims might consider the FBI's record of concealing evidence in murder cases. In February of 2020, DHS whistleblower Philip Haney, author of See Something, Say Nothing, a Homeland Security officer exposes the government's submission to jihad, was found dead in his California home. The local sheriff handed Haney's computer, thumb drive, and other materials to the FBI. By 2023, the FBI had failed to make that material public and at some point handed the investigation to the Federal Customs and Border Protection, which has determined that Haney's devices contained contraband, as this implies the murder victim was a secret criminal allied with foreign actors. The Islamic terrorist Haney exposed would have had motives to kill him, but no one from the FBI of any suspects, or no word rather from the FBI of any suspects. Consider also the case of Democratic National Committee staffer Seth Rich, a possible leaker of Hillary Clinton's emails. On July 17, 2016, Rich was gunned down on a Washington street. The FBI showed no interest in the basic questions of motive, means, and opportunity, but quickly grabbed Rich's laptop computer. In 2020, the Bureau admitted that it possessed the computer, and with the murder still unsolved, the FBI seeks to delay release of the computer's contents until 2088, a proxy for never. For the FBI's expertise in altering documents, consider the case of Kevin Kleinsmith of the Cyber Law Branch of the FBI's Office of General Counsel in Washington, D.C. As the Department of Justice explains, quote, Kleinsmith was assigned to provide legal support to FBI personnel working on Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI's covert operation against President Trump. Trump advisor Carter Page was a source for a U.S. government agency, the CIA. Kleinsmith, though, altered an email to show that Page was not a source, exposing Page to surveillance by the FISA court. With materials relevant to the Nashville murders being suppressed, FBI deception becomes a factor. Shooter Audrey Hale was white and murder victim Mike Hill was black, but racism failed to emerge as a possible motive. The Department of Justice, on alert for violent extremism, will not regard the mass murder in Nashville as a hate crime. On the establishment media side, CBS ordered staff not to describe Hale as transgender. In his initial statement, Joe Biden said the shooting was sick and heartbreaking, but failed to name a single victim. Quote, "We have to do more to stop gun violence," said Biden, who called on Congress to pass my assault weapons ban. For the Delaware Democrat, as Victor Davis Hanson noted, guns were the cause of the mass deaths, not the free will of a psychopathic killer. 3 days after the mass murder, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre failed to name any of the victims or identify the murderer, Audrey Hale. The Biden mouthpiece did say our hearts go out to the trans community as they are under attack right now. In reality, they are on the attack. As Matthew Booz noted in Groomed to Kill, the Democrat Party is, quote, hell-bent on feeding the malignant narcissism of the trans community in which they see a reliable, perpetually aggrieved voter base and a tool with which to terrorize society. The trans community is a, quote, unhinged cult that uses pseudoscience to maim children, and like all totalitarian cults, the trans cult preys upon the youth and shoots them dead in school on a Monday morning. Audrey Hale planned the attack for months, but her full manifesto has yet to be released. In the meantime, remember the Nashville Six, say their names, Evelyn Dykehouse, Mike Hill, William McKinney, Catherine Kuntz, Cynthia Peake, and Haley Scruggs. The struggle of the people against trans violence is the struggle of memory against forgetting. Now, as I mentioned, there's obviously the focus on the trans component to this. But the part that I thought was, it was a greater takeaway for me, is the history that the FBI does have in altering evidence, keeping information secret, attempting to keep it secret for an inevitable period of time when it involves certain shooters. And what, if anything, is in that manifesto that has compelled them to keep it hidden all this time? And when it is released, if there isn't any information in there that might make it obvious why it was kept under wraps as long as it has been, are we really to trust it given the FBI's history of falsifying evidence in order to, in the case of Carter Page, to get permission from a FISA court to surveil him? These are the unfortunate questions that wander into one's head when we have, on a federal level, a law enforcement division that has demonstrated a willingness to look the other way when shooters were amongst us, to falsify evidence to go after others, and to essentially just try and convince the American people that the group of individuals that are the biggest threat to our country, that are considered to be domestic terrorists, are individuals that really are never the ones that carry out these shootings. Incidentally, the shooter at the Louisville bank is an individual who listed his pronouns, which suggests he probably wasn't a conservative individual. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Garage experts for all of your garage transformation needs. I was doing some work in the garage one day last week, and the guy who drives the garbage truck through our neighborhood stops and gets out, and he's got questions he wants to ask about it, and noted just the overall aesthetics, and he asked some. I could tell it was something that he had looked into in the past, because he asked a number of questions that demonstrated about epoxy flooring and the prepping of the floor, that it was something that he looked into, and he walked away saying, well, it looks like I found something else I need to spend money on, and he laughed. you get an amazing transformation with your garage, be it storage, be it the flooring. And it really, truly is on a number of occasions been the sort of thing, the transformation of my garage, that have made people stop and ask questions and sometimes even take pictures, as weird as that may sound. Garage experts for all of your garage expert needs. You can find them under Nick's endorsements at ksgf.com. First Alert Forecast, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvement. Sunny, 75 for a high today. Clear, 48 for a low tonight. Sunny, 77 tomorrow. Thursday, mostly sunny, a high of 78. Ultimate Date Night, your registration opportunity at ksgf.com. Partnering with Wonders of Wildlife, Dogwood Canyon, and the Ozark Mill at Finley Farms. Sending you to some of the favorite spots in the 417 area, so you can register now at ksgf.com or the KSGF mobile app. I wanted to share with you something that many of you may have already known, but I've noticed more journalists referencing Australia when it comes to gun violence. And I believe it was Andrea Mitchell that asked the question, is it about time that America looks to Australia? Now, Australia is a different country, and it does not have the recognition of the human rights that we have, including to protect ourselves, and those are not laid out in the Constitution. But what occurred that oftentimes gets falsely relayed as a grand success was a confiscation of firearms in Australia after a mass shooting. And there is this false notion that there are less guns in Australia today than there were before, and that is not true. There are less people who have wanted to hassle with the rules and regulations that are required in order to protect oneself with a firearm. But the number of firearms that are owned in Australia rises, and it continues to rise. In fact, from one of the universities in Australia, there was a study that was done. New gun ownership figures revealed 25 years on from Port Arthur. That was the mass shooting that took place. And they note that Australian civilians now own more than 3.5 million registered firearms, an average of 4 for each licensed gun owner. Now, if you were to listen to some people on the left, you would think that there were virtually no firearms whatsoever in Australia. The proportion of Australians who hold a gun license has fallen by 48% since 1997. The proportion of Australian households with a firearm have fallen by 75% in recent decades. However, the data shows the people who already own guns have bought more rather than an increase in new gun owners, which has increased the number of total guns in Australia. Gun control expert, adjunct associate professor Philip Alpers from the School of Public Health, Faculty in Medicine and Health revealed the figures on the eve of the 25th anniversary of gun control since Port Arthur. An opinion piece in the Sydney Morning Herald by the head of the School of Public Health, Professor Joel Nagin, outlined the importance of continuing vigilance, a recently published perspective co-authored by Associate Professor Alpers in the high-impact New England Journal of Medicine also discussed this point. A university event, Public Health, at the forefront of social change, 25 years of gun control since Port Arthur, discussed the impact of Australia's post-1996 response to the future of firearms prevention. Associate Professor Philip Alpers, a specialist in firearm injury prevention, said in the wake of John Howard's gun reform, the risk of Australians dying by gunshots quickly fell by more than half, and it stayed that low for 25 years. But here's the more important question. See, the way that they present these numbers, if you don't know what questions to ask, if you don't know what information they've left out, it sounds as if they are able to tout a success. So they first lead with numbers, talking about the diminished number of households that have firearms. But if you dig through the study, you find that the number of firearms actually has increased in Australia. They also note that in the 25 years since the gun control measures went into place, there has been a diminished number of people killed by a firearm. But what about the number of homicides altogether? After all, if guns are the reason that people lose their lives, then there should be a decrease in the number of killings. But that hasn't occurred. In fact, a piece titled "Homicide on the Rise in Australia, Should We Be Concerned?" The latest report from the Australian Institute of Criminology shows the homicide rate is increasing in Australia. But should we be concerned, and how does Australia compare to other similar countries? Is crime in general increasing, or is it the rise in the homicide rate a standout? And they go through the numbers and they demonstrate that there is an increase. There's been a precipitous increase in homicides that have been taking place in Australia. And they note that the most common cause of death for a homicide victim is a stab wound, accounting for 37% of deaths, followed by blunt force at 19%, gunshot wounds at 13%. Other causes of death include strangulation, shaking, burns, and poisoning. Despite domestic despite homicides, domestic homicides rather, include intimate partner, child, spouse, or sibling, or other family incidents. In 2019 to 2020, the number of intimate partner homicides decreased to 45 incidents. That was the lower number since records began in 89-90. However, killings of a child by parents increased, while other categories remained stable. Residential settings accounted for 57% of homicide incidents, while 28% occurred in a public setting such as a park or a street. And it goes through the breakdowns of the numbers here, and it does do comparing and contrast to other countries to show, that, hey, it could be much worse. But the point here is the consistently false assertion that there are fewer firearms in Australia today than there were before the gun control laws went into effect back in the late 90s. And the number of homicides have not been consistently, they're not down, they have been on the uprise, which flies in the face of the argument that guns are the reason that violence exists. All they have done is shifted the form in which people have committed homicides, and it's stabbing now, followed by blunt force trauma, and then by a firearm. Some could argue that a stabbing and blunt force trauma is a more tragic way to go than a gunshot. It just is going to depend on the circumstance, but the point being, passing what is hailed as a successful gun control measure in Australia has not diminished the number of firearms. It has increased since, and it has not prevented killings from taking place. It just shifted the form in which the murderers commit the crime. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Incidentally, the favorite go-to for the left in demonizing inanimate objects as being responsible for people when they are killed at the hands of a gunman, it's the AR-15, right? Now, most of those individuals could not pick an AR-15 out of a lineup. But what they do is they cite the fact that, most of the time these shootings take place, it's the AR-15. That's why we need to get those weapons of war off the street. As if a person who has got it in his or her head that they want to go take out as many persons as possible, if they did not have access to the AR-15, that they all of a sudden would go, I guess I won't do it. If you were to ban, successfully somehow, AR-15s, if you just, boom, poofed, made everyone go away, the people who utilize that as their weapon of choice would simply replace it with another weapon of choice. Just like homicides in Australia have shifted from being a gun violence to a knife violence issue. People who are going to kill are going to kill. And taking away a, quote, weapon of war, taking away, even if you could magically, the most popularly used semi-automatic, in their minds, incidentally, because that isn't necessarily even the case, is not going to make them no longer be a killer. That's called reality. Switching gears here, after failing just 400 signatures short, or falling rather, Hotel of Terror owner Sterling Mathis submitted 800 additional signatures yesterday afternoon in his bid to halt the city's initiation of eminent domain on the property. Remains unclear if enough registered Springfield voters supported the measure to get it on the ballot. Of course, the city council passed a bill last month beginning the eminent domain process for the city to buy the horror attraction. The city hopes to demolish the building, which they claim is in the way of the city's efforts to daylight Jordan Creek in downtown Springfield. The city has been negotiating to buy the property from Mathis since 2019, but the parties have been unable to come to a deal, and that's something that he's talked about here on the program, how there were nowhere near the financial threshold that would be necessary for that facility to remain open at another location. The city's clerk's office staff was able to certify 1,166 of the approximately 2,132 signatures submitted. Once it was found insufficient, Mathis and his allies had 10 more days to collect signatures, and they collected twice what was necessary. So if those get cleared, I said it last week, if these signatures do come short still, I would determine some way to double check, because mistakes do happen. And I'm sure if there were some names thrown off that should not have been, it would clearly be a mistake by the city of Springfield. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, broker, owner of House Theory Realty for all of your needs. I saw a posting. I've mentioned this before, but it's not uncommon. Someone on social media, and they were a bit more specific in their request. It was a request for a good realtor. They said, but somebody you actually know, don't just throw names out here. And the reason that individual put that request in there, I'm sure, is because of what so many of us have seen, whether it is, a real estate agent or whatever capacity they serve in. They say, oh, somebody give me a name of a good this or a name of a good that. And you get what you ask for, a lot of names, but that doesn't tell you a lot. And that's why it is that I recommend personally Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, for any of your home buying or selling needs. She's not just a name. I've worked with her. So many of you have worked with her very successfully. You can read reviews of other people just like you and the experience that they had in having Emily Johnson help them sell their home, help them buy a new home, sometimes both at the same time, which can be very stressful, but she's great at it. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. More revelations about the federal government's actions concerning the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol have surfaced, and they could place more scrutiny on the state's role in the affair. A motion filed by a lawyer representing members of the Proud Boys, a right-wing activist group, indicates that there were a significant number of informants who infiltrated the group. Well, yeah. The motion, which was obtained by American Greatness Julie Kelly, noted that FBI informants were vastly outnumbered by confidential human sources, CHS, and plainclothes operators representing other law enforcement agencies. The document notes that an agency called Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, seems to have played a major role in handling and running CHSs among the Proud Boys on January 6, 2021. But even more damning is what the motion says about the behavior of those informants according to body cam footage. Quote, "This new information is plainly exculpatory," the document reads. Body cam videos worn on January 6th by undercover Metropolitan Police officers show the undercover officers cheering on the demonstrators with chants of "Go, go, go," and "Stop the steal," and "Whose house, our house." Undercover operatives were planted among the protesters as instigators, not just observers, it reads. The attorney also points out that there were at least 10 to 12 additional, previously unknown plainclothes MPD officers among the Proud Boys on January 6th. This means that there were at least 50 informants who had infiltrated the group on that day. Now, aside from one's legitimate concern about divisions of the government instigating an insurrection, what does this tell you about the way that this event on that day was described? Democrats claim that it was the single greatest assault on democracy. Then why did our government not only allow it to happen, but help facilitate it and participate in it? These are not wild accusations. This is all information that has come up during the trial of some of these Proud Boy members. The evidence that is being used against them has opened up the ability of their attorneys to see information that our government has, which they are exposing themselves, showing that they had a hand in this, in encouraging this according to body cam footage, directing people to go, go, go. Directing people to stop the steal. If this was the greatest attack on our freedom and our democracy since before 9/11, since the Civil War, Biden claimed, what is it of those officers, of those individuals that are, in whatever capacity they were working, but we now know of over 50? The fact that law enforcement agencies had infiltrated the Proud Boys and other right-wing groups is not new, but this filing sheds light on the extent to which the government used the informants. In December, the New York Times reported that the FBI had as many as 8 informants inside the Proud Boys in the months surrounding the storming of the Capitol. From the report and the papers, some of which were heavily redacted, the attorneys claim that some of the information the confidential sources had provided to the government was favorable to their effort to defend their clients against sedition charges and was improperly withheld by prosecutors until several days ago. In a sealed filing quoted by the defense, prosecutors argued that hundreds of pages of documents related to the FBI informants were neither suppressed by the government nor directly relevant to the case of the Proud Boys facing sedition charges. Enrique Tarrio, the group's former leader, Joseph Biggs, Ethan Nordine, Zachary Rell, and Dominic Pizzello. If the allegations made by the defense attorneys are accurate, it means government agents were actively encouraging the people present at the Capitol building to engage in violence. They were goading these individuals into committing crimes, which is the type of corruption that has been rife in the Bureau since its inception. Indeed, the FBI has a history of using informants who are highly paid and often convicts themselves to infiltrate politically oriented groups and persuade their members to engage in extremism so that they can get more arrests. Another report revealed that the Bureau ran the same type of operation on activists protesting against police brutality after the murder of George Floyd. Hopefully, these revelations will aid in the defense of those being charged by the same government that allegedly pushed them into committing the crimes. Unfortunately, for many others, it may be too late. This really is no surprise if you followed and understand how the so-called plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer played out. And it was very, very, very similar in fashion, where a majority of the people who were involved were individuals working on behalf of our government, and convinced these individuals to participate in carrying out a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan. In many instances, they did everything they possibly could to try and back out, but the government, the folks working either for or on behalf of our government, convinced them to stay in the plot. This is information that was learned during testimony, and so for this to be repeating itself, but on a national stage, is no surprise, sadly, and that we have a government that is actively setting up Americans to go to prison, all for the sake of demonizing a portion of our population as a bunch of domestic terrorists, and that would be Trump supporters. Glenn Beck is coming up next. Any of the show that you miss, we've got the on-demand section at ksgf.com.